1904. Year. That's all it takes for the world to stop. Factories slow down. Schools rearrange schedules. Entire cities fall silent. More than 5 billion people, over half of humanity, follow the tournament in some way. A single final can attract an audience larger than the population of every continent except Asia. Think about that. A game played with 1 ball and 22 players. There was no trophy, no famous stadiums, no legends. Just a sport that many people didn't even take seriously. So how did football grow from a simple pastime into the world's greatest sporting event? The answer begins long before the first kick of the first World Cup. Because this story isn't really about football. It's about ambition, politics, war, pride, and one man's belief that a game could unite the world. But this story doesn't begin there. It begins on muddy fields in 19th century England. Back then, football wasn't one game. Every town seemed to have its own version. Some allowed players to carry the ball, others didn't. Some had almost no rules at all. Matches often turned into chaos, with hundreds of players running through streets and fields. Nobody could agree on how the sport should be played. That changed in 1863. Representatives from several English clubs gathered in London with one goal: create a single set of rules. Those meetings led to the formation of the Football Association. For the first time, football had an official identity. It seemed like a small step. It wasn't. Because once, everyone played by the same rules. Clubs could compete fairly. Competitions became organized. Crowds grew larger every year. Soon, football spread beyond England. Sailors carried it to ports across Europe. Railway workers introduced it to new towns. British merchants and engineers took it to South America, Africa, and Asia without realizing it. They were exporting more than a sport. They were exporting an obsession. By the end of the 19th century, football was exploding in popularity. Children played in dusty streets. Factory workers formed teams after long shifts. Ports, schools, churches, and neighborhoods all wanted clubs of their own. But there was one problem. Countries had begun playing against each other. Yet there was no organization to manage international football. Every match became an argument over rules, referees, and eligibility. Something bigger was needed. In 1904, representatives from 7 European nations met in Paris. Their goal seemed simple: create an international governing body for football. That meeting gave birth to FIFA. At first, almost nobody imagined what FIFA would become. It had only a handful of members, very little money, almost no influence. Its leaders simply wanted countries to cooperate. But one man saw something far greater. His name was Jules Rimet. Unlike many sports officials of his time, Rimet believed football belonged to everyone, young or old, powerful nations or small ones. He dreamed of a tournament where countries from around the world would compete, not as enemies, but as rivals on the field. It sounded impossible. International travel was painfully slow. Crossing the Atlantic took weeks by ship. Many football associations could barely afford domestic competitions, let alone overseas travel. Still, Rimet refused to give up. Then something unexpected happened. The Olympic Games began including football. Crowds loved it. Players loved it. National pride grew stronger with every match. For the first time, people could imagine a truly global football tournament. But the Olympics had limits. Professional players were restricted. Football remained only one event among many. Rimet wanted something entirely different. A tournament dedicated to football alone. Many people laughed at the idea. Who would travel thousands of miles just to play football? Who would pay for it? Would fans even care? These weren't unreasonable questions. In the 1920s, flying across continents wasn't an option. Ships were expensive. Teams would spend weeks away from home. Some nations feared the financial risk would destroy their football associations. The dream seemed impossible. Then came a country few expected: Uruguay. At the time, Uruguay wasn't a global superpower. Its population was barely 2 million. Yet on the football field, it was unstoppable. The nation had won Olympic gold medals in 1924 and 1928, defeating Europe's best teams. More importantly, 1930 marked 100 years since Uruguay's independence. The government made an extraordinary offer. It would build a massive stadium, pay many travel expenses, and host the world's first FIFA World Cup. This changed everything. FIFA accepted. History had found its starting point. There was only one obstacle left: actually getting teams there. Today, players board airplanes and arrive within hours. In 1930, the journey itself became an adventure. European teams spent nearly 3 weeks crossing the Atlantic Ocean. Some trained on the decks of ships. Others kicked footballs across narrow spaces while waves crashed around them. Imagine preparing for the biggest tournament of your life while sailing across an ocean. Several countries decided it simply wasn't worth the effort. Many withdrew. Only 13 nations eventually entered. 7 from South America, 4 from Europe, 2 from North America. Compared with today's 32, and soon 48, it seemed tiny. But nobody knew they were witnessing history. On July 13, 1930, the first FIFA World Cup began. There were no billion-dollar television deals, no giant sponsorships, no worldwide live broadcasts. Most people around the globe wouldn't even know the tournament was happening until weeks later. Yet inside Uruguay, the atmosphere was unforgettable. Crowds packed the stadiums, flags covered the streets. The dream had become real. Goals were scored, heroes emerged. Nations discovered that football could unite millions behind a single team. But that's only part of the story. The biggest moment was still waiting. Uruguay reached the final. Their opponent was neighboring Argentina. The rivalry already ran deep. Now the entire world was watching. Nearly 70,000 spectators squeezed into Montevideo's Estadio Centenario. The tension was enormous. Even the choice of match ball became an argument. Argentina wanted its ball. Uruguay wanted theirs. The referee solved the dispute by using one ball for the first half and another for the second. It sounds almost unbelievable today. But in those early years, football was still inventing itself. Argentina led during the match. For a moment, it looked as though the hosts would lose their own tournament. Then everything changed. Uruguay fought back, goal after goal. The final whistle blew. Uruguay had won the first ever FIFA World Cup, defeating Argentina 4-2. Celebrations erupted across the country. Church bells rang. People filled the streets. A sporting event had become a national celebration, unlike anything football had ever seen. Jules Rimet finally handed over the trophy he had dreamed about for years. His impossible idea had survived, but nobody knew whether it would happen again. Because just as football was beginning to unite the world itself was beginning to fall apart. Economic collapse spread across nations. Political tensions rose higher every year. And within a decade, a conflict would erupt that threatened not only the future of the World Cup, but the future of the entire world. The world entered the 1930s, filled with uncertainty. The Great Depression had shattered economies across the globe. Millions were out of work. Governments struggled to survive. For many people, football became one of the few escapes from daily hardship. Yet even in difficult times, the World Cup refused to disappear. In 1934, the tournament moved to Italy. This time, it looked far more organized. More nations wanted to participate, forcing FIFA to introduce qualification matches for the first time. The competition was becoming truly international. But there was one problem. Football was no longer just about sport. It had become a powerful political tool. Italy was ruled by Benito Mussolini, who understood something many leaders were beginning to realize. A victory on the football field could inspire as much national pride as a victory on the battlefield. The government invested heavily in the tournament. Massive stadiums were built. Every Italian victory was celebrated as proof of national strength. Italy won the World Cup. Some celebrated the achievement. Others questioned whether politics had influenced the competition. Whether those claims were true or not, one thing became clear. The World Cup was now much bigger than football. This changed everything. 4 years later, France hosted the 1938 tournament. By then, Europe felt like a continent holding its breath. Germany had annexed Austria only months before the tournament. Austria had already qualified for the World Cup, but after the annexation, its national team disappeared almost overnight. Several Austrian players were forced into the German squad. Imagine training for years to represent your country, only to watch that country vanish before the tournament even begins. The tension was impossible to ignore. Italy defended its title, becoming the first nation to win back-to-back World Cups. But almost nobody remembers that victory for football alone, because within a year, the world would be at war. Then, silence. The World Cup scheduled for 1942 and 1946 never happened. Instead of cheering inside stadiums, millions heard explosions. Instead of wearing football jerseys, young men wore military uniforms. Many players never returned home. Others came back carrying wounds that could not be seen. The tournament that Jules Rimet dreamed would unite nations disappeared for 12 long years. For a moment, it seemed as though the World Cup had reached its end. But that's only part of the story. When the war finally ended, the world faced an enormous question. How do you bring people together after so much destruction? The answer, surprisingly, involved football. In 1950, Brazil hosted the first World Cup after the war. The country built the Maracana Stadium, the largest football stadium ever constructed at the time. Nearly 200,000 spectators could fit inside. Picture that, an entire city gathering under one roof. Brazil entered the tournament as overwhelming favorites. The nation expected only one outcome: victory. Everything led to the final match against Uruguay. The atmosphere was unlike anything football had ever experienced. Newspapers had already printed celebratory headlines. Songs had been written. The trophy seemed destined to stay in Brazil. Then the impossible happened. Uruguay scored, then scored again. When the final whistle blew, the stadium fell into complete silence. Nearly 200,000 people stood frozen. Many cried openly. Some reportedly couldn't believe what they had witnessed. The match became known simply as the Maracanazo. It remains one of the greatest upsets in sports history. Think about that. One football match changed how an entire nation saw itself. But football never stopped moving forward. The 1954 World Cup in Switzerland produced another miracle. West Germany faced the mighty Hungarian team in the final. Hungary had gone for years without losing a single match. They had defeated England 6-3 in London. Many believed they were unbeatable. After only 8 minutes, Hungary led 2-0. The final seemed over. Then something extraordinary happened. West Germany fought back, goal by goal, minute by minute. Against every expectation, they won 3-2. The victory became known as the Miracle of Bern. For post-war Germany, it meant far more than football. It symbolized hope, confidence, a new beginning. This decision seemed small at the time. It wasn't. Because people were beginning to understand that football could shape national identity just as powerfully as history itself. Then came television. Nobody expected what happened next until the late 1950s. Most people experienced the World Cup through newspapers or radio. Families gathered around radios, imagining every pass and every goal in their minds. Television changed all of that. Suddenly, millions could watch matches live from their own homes. The players became global celebrities. Children copied their heroes in backyards and schoolyards around the world. Football was no longer just an event. It had become shared global entertainment. Then, in 1958, the world met a 17-year-old boy from Brazil. His name was Pelé. At an age when most teenagers were still in school, he scored 6 goals during the tournament, including 2 in the final. Brazil won its first World Cup. A superstar had arrived, but he wasn't just winning matches. He was changing how football was played. His creativity, confidence, and joy inspired millions of children to believe they could do the same. Over the next 12 years, Brazil would win 3 World Cups. The yellow jersey became one of the most recognizable symbols in sport. Football had found its first truly global icon. And yet, the World Cup was still evolving. Every tournament introduced new heroes, new heartbreaks, new moments that no one could have predicted. The competition that had begun with just 13 teams arriving by ship had transformed into the greatest sporting spectacle on earth. But the biggest explosion in the World Cup's popularity was still ahead. Because in the decades that followed, television, sponsorships, unforgettable legends, and billions of viewers would turn a simple football tournament into one of humanity's greatest shared traditions. And that's where the final chapter of this story begins. Then came the 1970 World Cup in Mexico. It wasn't just another tournament. It marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. For the first time, the World Cup was broadcast live in color to millions of homes around the world. Families who had only imagined the game through black and white television or radio could finally see the bright yellow of Brazil's jerseys, the green of the pitch, and the emotion on the players' faces. The tournament suddenly felt closer than ever, and at the center of it all was Pelé. By then, he was no longer the young teenager who had shocked the world in 1958. He was a seasoned leader, carrying the expectations of an entire nation. Brazil played football unlike anyone else. Fast, creative, fearless. Passes seemed effortless. Attacks flowed like music. Defenders chased shadows, while Brazil made the impossible look ordinary. In the final against Italy, Brazil won 4-1. It was one of the greatest performances ever seen on a football pitch. Pelé lifted his 3rd World Cup. No player has ever matched that achievement. More importantly, Brazil earned permanent ownership of the original Jules Rimet trophy after winning it 3 times. It felt like the perfect ending. But there was one problem. The original trophy would later be stolen from the headquarters of the Brazilian Football Confederation in 1983. Unlike its famous disappearance before the 1966 tournament, when it was recovered by a dog named Pickles, but this time it was never found. It is widely believed that the trophy was melted down. The symbol of football's greatest dream had vanished forever. FIFA responded by creating a new trophy, the one players lived today. This decision seemed small at the time. It wasn't. The new FIFA World Cup trophy quickly became one of the most recognizable objects on Earth. Made of 18-karat gold and weighing over 6 kilograms, it represents 2 human figures holding up the world. Millions dream of touching it. Only a handful ever will. As the decades passed, the World Cup was invested. Television rights became worth billions of dollars. Sponsors realized something remarkable. For 1 month every 4 years, the entire planet was paying attention to the same event. Nothing else in sport came close. Then came moments that would live forever. In 1986, a small Argentine captain named Diego Maradona produced one of football's most unforgettable performances. Against England, he scored 2 goals just 4 minutes apart. One became known as the Hand of God. The other was later voted the goal of the century. But the World Cup has never belonged to just one nation. Every generation creates new heroes, new heartbreak, new stories. In 1998, France hosted the tournament for the first time. The competition expanded from 24 teams to 32. That meant more countries, more fans, more dreams. France defeated Brazil in the final, led by Zinedine Zidane. For the host nation, it became a night of celebration that is still remembered today. 4 years later came one of the biggest surprises ever. The 2002 World Cup was hosted jointly by Japan and South Korea. The first time the tournament had ever been held in Asia, and the first co-hosted World Cup in history. Nobody expected South Korea to reach the semifinals, yet they did. The tournament reminded everyone that football is beautifully unpredictable. Favorites fall, underdogs rise, nothing is guaranteed. Then, in 2010, history was made once again. For the first time, the World Cup arrived in Africa. South Africa became the host. The opening ceremony, the sound of thousands of vuvuzelas, and the joy of seeing the world's biggest tournament played on African soil created memories that stretched far beyond football. It showed that the World Cup truly belonged to every continent. Just 4 years later, another unforgettable chapter unfolded. Brazil welcomed the world back. Their supporters believed destiny had brought the trophy home. Instead, they witnessed one of the greatest shocks in sporting history. Germany defeated Brazil 7-1 in the semi-final. 7 goals inside Brazil. Few couldn't believe the scoreboard. Millions watched in stunned silence. It became one of the most astonishing results ever recorded. Yet football has a remarkable way of writing news stories. In 2018, France lifted the trophy once again. Then, in 2022, the world witnessed the pressure grew. Extra time couldn't separate them. Everything came down to penalties, when Gonzalo escaped him throughout his extraordinary career. After nearly 2 decades at the top of football, he had completed his story. For millions of fans, it felt like the perfect ending. But football never really has endings, only new beginnings. The World Cup continues to evolve. The 2026 tournament will feature 48 teams instead of 32, making it the largest World Cup in history. More nations than ever before will have the chance to compete on football's biggest stage. More children will dream. More legends will be born. More unforgettable moments are waiting. Think about how far this tournament has come. It began with just 13 teams arriving by ship. Today, teams travel by jet. Matches are streamed instantly across the globe, and billions of people can watch the same goal at exactly the same moment. A dream imagined by Jules Rimet more than a century ago has become one of humanity's greatest shared traditions. Every 4 years, borders seem a little smaller. Languages matter a little less. For 1 month, strangers celebrate together, cry together, and hold their breath together. The World Cup has never been just about deciding who plays football the best. It's a story of hope after war, nations finding pride, ordinary people believing that, for 90 minutes, anything is possible. And perhaps that's the real reason the World Cup has survived for nearly a century. Because long after the final whistle blows and the confetti disappears, it leaves behind something far more valuable.